If you want to defeat the enemy's troops, then prepare the offensive operation secretly. By taking advantage of the element of surprise, any army can make an unexpected strike on the enemy, so the war begins. If your goal is defense, then everything works contrary to the first scenario. Your troops are constantly in enemy's sight. Neighbors call you a militarist, but this doesn't mean that the war has started. A show of force that is not applied is considered a hybrid war. Understanding the risks that the enemy face and watching this force, they can refuse from their aggressive plans. In the case of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the hybrid knot of the fight was used twice. Being unable to demonstrate to the aggressor an adequately strong army or a powerful economy, Ukraine placed emphasis on diplomacy. You're watching the 51st episode of the program History of the War. In 2014, the Russian Federation committed an act of armed aggression against Ukraine. The war has been ongoing for several years. We're hot on the trail of the course of events in this war and are tracking the links between military operations, diplomacy, politics, and economics. We're trying to understand how it was and for what purpose. Every person has rights and obligations. In a law-governed state, even obvious things require legal grounds. On March 17, 2015, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine adopted a resolution recognizing certain lands of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions as temporarily occupied territories. This document was nothing other than a legally established statement of real facts. However, the so-called Kremlin puppets from the DPR and the LPR called this resolution a violation of the Minsk agreements. But at the same time, the Russian-backed militants said nothing about the daily violation of the ceasefire, the shelling that was allegedly taken to the rear, and the work of sabotage groups. On March the 19th, a Ukrainian checkpoint near the village of Oryhove in the Popasna Rayon came under fire of the enemy that used small arms. A soldier of the 24th Brigade was killed from a bullet wound. The next day, 2 soldiers of this subdivision were killed by the explosion of a tripwire in the area of the Proletarska mine. On March the 20th, 2 soldiers of the 81st Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine were killed during an attack by a reconnaissance group in the village of Opatny near Donetsk. 1 soldier of the 28th Brigade was also killed near Hnutove. Violating the ceasefire, Russian militants got a return fire. On March the 21st, they attacked Ukrainian positions near Shirokine. A soldier of the Azov regiment was wounded. Providing covering fire to the infantry, the Ukrainian artillery forces struck a tank of Russian-backed militants and put it out of action. Using mortar fire as a cover, the enemy managed to evacuate the damaged vehicle from the battlefield. War always leaves a trail in cities and villages. Damaged buildings and roads blown to pieces by heavy vehicles are evidence of this fact. But warfare also leaves behind a train of unexploded ordnance and mines that will be waiting for their victims for many years to come. On March the 22nd, a vehicle of the National Guard of Ukraine was blown up by an unknown explosive device in the vicinity of Slavyansk, which is located 50 kilometers from the front line. As a result of the explosion, 2 soldiers were killed. Despite attempts to arrange a ceasefire, the situation in the Donetsk region was quite strenuous. Having lost airport terminals, the Ukrainian army took up positions north of the landing strip of the Prokofiev airport. Use of the object for its intended purpose was out of the question. Trying to repel the Ukrainian forces from the airport, the militants repeatedly fired at the Ukrainian positions in this area. Moreover, despite the common withdrawal of heavy weapons, the use of tanks and mortars, sluggish and ongoing hostilities became a so-called visiting card of this area of the ATO zone for a long time. On March the 26th, taking advantage of the fact that the Ukrainian army diverted the main artillery forces from the demarcation line, the Russian-backed militants occupied part of the village of Shirokine. During the battle, the soldiers of the Azov regiment managed to destroy the enemy tank and several militants. On the same day, the so-called 22nd humanitarian convoy, sent out by Russian President Vladimir Putin, arrived on the territory of Ukraine. According to the statements of the Russian side, trucks transported medicines, products and seeds. 140 trucks brought over 1,500 tons of various seeds. The very next day, these explosive seeds gave their first lethal blows. It is worth recalling that the illegal status of the Russian-led militants allowed them to interpret the essence of the Minsk agreements quite freely. Using heavy weapons, the Russian-backed militants scrutinized the reaction of international observers and the method of organizing provocations. On March 27, 2015, a local resident in Shirokino was killed by a Russian-backed militant who used heavy mortars. The Russian-backed militants did not stop there. On the evening of the same day, they fired MLR Grad at the village of Novotoshkivske. In total, the militants fired 60 missiles. 20 of them hit residential areas. Despite the reduction in the intensity of the fighting, the stabilization of the front line, and the partial withdrawal of heavy weapons, violation of the ceasefire agreement was observed at the very least 15 to 20 times a day. On March the 31st, the battle to seize Shirokino continued. 2 soldiers of the Azov regiment were wounded, but according to intelligence reports, at least 3 militants were killed. The next day, as a result of an hour-long battle, 2 other militants were killed. While the war became positional, the battles became more localized. Far from the front line, the second round of a so-called Operation Mindcrime was launched against the local population. Already on April the 2nd, the next humanitarian convoy moved forward from Russia. It consisted of 120 trucks, which were transporting 1,400 tons of cargo. OSCE observers fixed a large number of fuel trucks in this column of transport trucks. This is not surprising because in the absence of any economy, the supply of so-called marionette republics completely fell on the shoulders of the Russian budget. Both armies took a break to restore the combat capability of their troops, accumulate resources, and repair military hardware. But the battles did not end. In fact, the shootings took place in the same sectors of the front. All of this resulted in the repletion of the locality with mines that explode according to several different systems. So, on April the 3rd, 3 Ukrainian soldiers were killed as a result of the explosion of a landmine near Avdiivka. On April the 5th, a similar situation happened in Shirokino, where 2 artillery observers of the 37th Battalion died as a result of a mine explosion. On the same day, the Russian-backed militants fired at the military positions of the 92nd Brigade Facade Strongpoint near the town of Shestia. By unfortunate coincidences, a missile hit the mine barrier, which detonated. As a result of the blast of several anti-tank mines, 4 soldiers of the 92nd Brigade were killed. Here it is worth noting a very important nuance. The term frontline in the ATO zone can be interpreted as a target of separate strongpoints with fairly wide breaches between them. It is very difficult for a large division of the army to pass through such a breach. This is much easier for one soldier or a reconnaissance group. The line of defense is constantly being upgraded, and the commanders of the military forces are applying all possible methods in order to block the blind zones for the safety of civilians. They also place artificial obstacles. There are direction signs and trails that are mined. Very often such minefields are marked with special signs to warn local residents and ensure the safety of their lives. Besides that, There are cases of mining of Russian-backed militants, which were exploited by Russian propaganda to discredit the soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces. If to take away a weapon from the body of a killed militant, he will appear to be a local civilian. So the question of what this alleged civilian was doing in neutral territory and why did he cross the front line in an unspecified place remains unanswered. There are cases when the Russian-backed militants fled from credit card debts or were simply not satisfied with the current situation in Novorossiya and jumped over to the Ukrainian side. There are situations where the family members of a militant live on the territory controlled by the official authorities and the militant periodically visits them. Sometimes such voyages across the front line are made for the purpose of transferring intelligence data, while in other cases they're executed with the aim of committing various acts of terrorism. On April 6, 2015, near Mariupol in positions of the 36th Brigade, a tent was burned. Senior warrant officer Serhiy Kozakov saw the center of the flame in time and sounded an alarm. He saved the lives of 8 soldiers, but he himself sustained fatal injuries due to the explosion of ammunition. The results of the investigation revealed that the fire was an act of sabotage. According to the theories of the Russian General Gerasimov, a hybrid war is being waged by non-military means, but Ukrainian soldiers paid with their blood every day in the name of peace in the rear, for the possibility of waging disinformation and diplomatic war and for the right to live a normal life. On April 7th, there was intense fighting in the Donetsk region. A soldier of the 93rd Brigade was blown up by a mine in the area of Piske, and in the area of Opetne, 2 soldiers of the 11th Motorized Infantry Battalion were killed as a result of a battle with the enemy. On April 8th, in the Kurakhove area near Mariinka, a soldier of the 28th Brigade was killed by a sniper's bullet. Blood spilled the next day. A former supporter of the DPR named Shilin distinguished himself. In the summer of 2014, he deserted the army of the self-declared Donetsk Republic, but it turned out that he did not take the righteous path. When a local police officer went to the militant's home to carry out a scheduled inspection, the frustrated militant hit the officer in the head with an axe 10 times. Inspector Andriy Haradja died instantly. As it turned out, he was among those police officers of the city of Mariupol who remained true to their duty and opposed the separatists at the very start of the defense of the city. 1 year before his death, on April 16, 2014, a policeman was injured when the DPR militants attacked the Mariupol military unit. On April 9th, the Azov Regiment and the Donbas Battalion destroyed the building that served the militants as barracks in Shirokine. On the same day, observing the situation, the representative of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, Michael Batsirkiv, stated the need to demilitarize and separate the sites in this locality. Relative peace and calm will come to Shirokine only in February next year. At that moment, there will not be a single building that has not been destroyed, and there will not be a single civilian in this locality. The Azov Sea coast will be mined and anti-tank hedgehogs will be placed on the beach instead of vacationers. If you wish to defeat the enemy's troops, put it off its guard. Prepare the offensive and strike without pity and doubt at the most vulnerable point at the most inopportune moment, like Russia. If you have to hold the defense against a strong opponent, then everything is different. You can surrender to the enemy, you can resist. You can show the enemy that the battle will not be easy. You can show your strength. You can wave the flag, just like Ukraine did.